What's up, mamas? For this segment, we have Lauren Pace. She's an author, a health coach, and a mom, and we're going to be talking about helping kids handle their frustration proactively. Lauren, thank you so much for being here with me.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be part of the mom conference this year.
I know it's going to be awesome. We're excited to pick your brain a little bit here. So for you, it can be with something you read in a book or in school or some parenting advice you received from your mom or someone like that. But what was the best parenting advice you've ever received that you've implemented with your own children?
So my favorite quote, it's from Dr. Becky Bailey, is discipline is not something that we do to children. It's something we develop within them. And I love this perspective because we're not like raising kids to just control them, but we're trying to develop them into their own healthy humans. And so to understand discipline from this perspective helps you to really help them with the tools that they need to be able to get through difficult times and manage their frustrations and all of that.
I love that. So I've heard before, kind of along those same lines. So when you're trying to discipline your kid, instead of immediately putting them in timeout, try and talk to them and figure out what's going on. So if you are doing your best to try and figure out what's going on and they still are misbehaving, what advice do you have then?
Okay, so something that I use is called the safe place. So before I talk about the safe place, I kind of want to talk about just this like pattern of behavior. So when kids are just like, basically this morning at breakfast, we were in a green arrow moment. Everything was going really, really well. We're just having fun talking. That's a time I can teach. When my kids are starting to like play together and one kid sees something another could have, that's called the yellow arrow moment. It starts to escalate into this like curve, okay? And then the child maybe takes the toy from the other kid. All of a sudden, you've hit eruption mode. That's the red arrow moment. So you got this bell curve. And a lot of times we jump in the red arrow moment and we're like, okay, you give it back. You say what you don't like. We try to coach them through. And those are beautiful things to teach our children. We want to teach them conflict management. We want to tell them how to communicate their needs. But a lot of times our timing is off. So if they are completely have lost their minds, then we just cannot go in and teach. Okay. So then it goes back down the bell curve and it gets to the green arrow moment. And that's when we can teach. So in that red arrow moment, what I would suggest is to give everybody a break. There's nothing that says you have to address the conflict right when it happens. And a lot of times because of just the way we've been raised, the way society is, people expect you to do something about that behavior right then, or you're not parenting or you're not disciplining. But what's hard about that is their brain, going back to the brain, their brain is in a place, an emotional state. Their amygdala is taking over. They're in fight or flight mode. So if you go to them with logic and say, okay, you need to say sorry, they're just going to say sorry to get past the moment. And it's not really going to sink in and teach them anything about empathy or communicating their needs. So you go to the safe place. They can feel any feeling they want to feel. And when they're ready to come out of their safe place, then that is when you say, okay, when you had this block or something, I'm using very juvenile, young examples, but when you had this block and Maylee wanted it, what could you say? You could say, I want the block, right? Okay, let's practice. You practice it and then you reintroduce them back into that scene or whatever. This works with so many things. Like, so if your kid is at the grocery store and they want something, what kid doesn't want like everything when you're at the store? Right. Anyways, when you're there and your child like sees something and says, I want that. And you're like, no, you can't have it. And then they're going to maybe start having a tantrum or something. It's not even with another child. They're just having a tantrum. And a lot of times we're going to go to them with logic and be like, we can't, mommy doesn't have money to buy that right now. Or and we try to explain it. That's more for our benefit than it is for them because they're just in an emotional place. And so in this situation, there's obviously not a place like a room that you can take them to sit down or whatever. But sometimes the safe place is just like how we respond to them to validate their feelings. So what I try to do is like, I know it's really hard when we can't have what we want. Do you need a hug? How can I help you feel this frustration? You recognize that the emotion's there. You don't try to dismiss the emotion, because for them, it's like life or death. I wanted that candy bar. And if you need to, maybe, hug them. Or I've seen moms, like I was at the dollar store the other day, and there was a mom just like sitting on the floor with her kid, like taking a minute.
Aww.
And that was like her safe place. I know. I'm like, I wanted to be like, girl, you got this. This is awesome.
Way to go, Mom.
It's embarrassing sometimes to do that, but that is so appropriate to do sometimes, to kind of give them a moment to regroup and then keep going. So I think that a lot of times we go with the logic, but that break and that processing and that validation of emotions is so important.
I love that. Oh my gosh, I want to implement everything that you just said. I'm going to have to go back and rewatch everything and take notes. So when you talk about a safe space, do you call it that with your children? Do you say, let's go to your safe space? Or is this basically what you are calling it?
So what I call it when I teach it is the safe place. But in our home, I say, let's go take a break. Okay. And that's the words that I use. Some people call it time in, but time in can be confusing because sometimes there's rules tied to what a time in is. And I don't like the rigidity of rules because it's going to look different for every kid. So with a safe place, it's sometimes just talking through them and helping validate those emotions in the grocery cart. And sometimes it's actually physically taking them to the safe place. In my kids' rooms, I would say Maylee's is her rocking chair and Charlie's is his bed. But that's going to change, and it's going to look different all of the time.
And do you go with them when this is happening, or do you say, okay, you need to sit here for a while and I'll come get you? A
really good question. So my son I've been doing this with my kids since my son was probably 18 months. And I would sit with him at that age. I would just sit with him, and that would be his safe place. I was his safe place. As a mom who's home all the time, you kind of just are automatically the safe place. Right. But as he got older, then I would take him to the safe place and sit with him in there. So I'd take him to his room or something like that, or the couch in the playroom or something. But then I would just start to be his outbursts got a little bit more physical. Where he'd want to throw things, just go everywhere. And I don't need to sit there for that. So I'd be like, oh, you're feeling really frustrated. Just feel everything you're feeling. And when you're ready, you can come on out. And that's the difference between time out and a safe place, is that I'm not putting him in there for a certain amount of time, but the choices his body's making is telling me, you need to take a break. Your body's telling me you need to take a break. You're making the choice with your body, whether you know it or not, subconsciously, to act like this. And so you're making the choice to take a break in your safe place. But also when your body's calm, you're making the choice to come out of your safe place. And what's cool about that is sometimes it takes seriously 20 seconds and he's able to regulate and come out. And sometimes he's in there for 20 minutes and ends up falling asleep. And it's cool, that's what he needed, Right. With my daughter, most of the time I go with her. She's 2.5. But lately I've been you seem really sad. So the other night at dinner, she was screaming. Of course she was screaming. She was screaming about wanting to pour the milk, but the milk jug was completely full. And I'm not going to let my 2.5-year-old pour the milk jug. So I'll help you, independence. Anyway, so she starts screaming and I just picked her up and we went to her room and I rocked for a minute. I said, you're feeling really sad about the milk? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, that's okay. I can help you with the milk if you want, or you can just stand here and be sad if you want. And she's like, I want to go back. And I'm like, okay, you ready to go back and stop screaming? And she's like, yeah. So I brought her out and she was happy. And she has crocodile tears on her face. She's so happy. But sometimes just removing them from that situation for a minute helps them to be okay, whoa, yeah, I was being a crazy, crazy woman. And now I'm ready to calm down.
Oh, I love that. I think that is so awesome. Because I feel every little kid has something going on, right?
Yeah.
And not even little kid, even as they get older. And you mentioned, so is most of your study with younger children, or do you have any advice for parents of teenagers that have behavioral issues?
Yeah, so all of my examples are with younger children because I've worked just in a preschool. I mean, probably up to 8 is what I usually work with. And my own kids are under, that same age.
Right.
But you can use these same strategies with anybody you're having a relationship with. Kids, parents, grandparents. So the first strategy is the green arrow moment. Don't try to go in and fix the conflict when everything's escalated. Come back to it when everyone's calm. So sometimes, especially with teenagers, they're going to be in the red arrow moment a lot. And a lot of that is hormones. They just can't even get back to that green arrow moment as easily. And so instead of trying to fight it, everyone just needs to take a break. So I would just be like, hey, I want to talk to you about this, but right now I'm feeling really frustrated. You seem like you're feeling really frustrated. Why don't we take a break and then we'll talk about this, or something like that. Can be really useful so that you're not like crashing and clashing and saying things that you regret. Because when we're angry, we're going to say things that are going to be more damaging to the relationship, and taking 5 minutes or like an hour to process those feelings and then come back is going to be a lot more effective.
I think that's such great advice, because even with my own spouse, my natural tendency is to be like, let's talk about it now. Like, let's do this right now. But that's not always what you should be doing when tensions are high. So I think that's really good advice with any relationship, and especially with your kids. So you obviously have so much knowledge about behavioral issues and everything. The title of our conference is Confessions of an Imperfect Mom. So has there been a time where you haven't necessarily followed your own advice, if you will, made some mistakes, but everything turned out okay? Do you have any examples like that?
Oh, absolutely. And I feel like I'm pretty transparent in that I'm definitely not a perfect parent. I yell, just like I said before. I get overwhelmed. I cry. I'm like, okay, I'm done being a mom today. Your turn. You take them. And I think that it's important to realize that even though I have all of these skills as a behavior coach, I know what I should be doing. I have advice. If someone comes to me, I'll be like, oh, you could try this. That doesn't mean that's exactly where my brain goes in the moment of high stress situations, because I have my own emotions too to deal with. And so, like, for example, this week, as we're transitioning my child from a crib to a bed, it's not gone well at all. She used to sleep for 7 to 8 every day, every night, and then like 3-hour naps. So that's like amazing.
Oh, wow.
Then she fell really bad out of her crib. And so I'm like, okay, it's time to transition her. This is going to be fun. I wanted her to stay in her crib forever. And I started to transition her. And so I've been laying with her like 2 hours every day, and she like won't fall asleep. And so then I'm like, okay, I've already laid with you 2 hours, but like then 4 hours later, I got to lay with her again at like 6:30 or 7 o'clock. And then I'll lay there for like 2 to 3 hours. It's like the worst. And like the other night, my husband slept with her from 11 until 5 in the morning. Like, it's just been so bad. And I seriously, like, when she screams, instead of doing what I should be doing and like trying to encourage her to say the things, I'm just like, stop screaming. Anyway, so I was like losing it the other day, and I'm just like, I cannot keep doing this. Keep in mind, I'm 34 weeks pregnant at this point. Like, I feel like I'm going to die. I'm like, I cannot go off no sleep. I'm already going to be doing that soon. And after I put her down and she fell asleep, I was like, this is the best thing ever. I started to like, my head started to like reel, and I'm like, okay, what does she need? What is she trying to communicate? What is something that I can do that's consistent to help her to sleep in her bed? And I came downstairs and I told my husband, I'm like, I'm such a nerd because I like do like behavior coaching on myself. But I came down and I made like a chart with like choices. She really, really values her independence and really likes to be in control. But there's some things she can't control. And that's where the problem is like, I'm laying there and she'll be like, I want this. No, I want this. I want this. And keep changing her mind because she's a master negotiator. And so I decided that she can have some choices, but some things just need to be part of the routine. So I made this little chart that says, you can sleep in your bed or on the floor. I don't know why. She wants to sleep on the floor, whatever. You know, you got to let go of some of your controls.
Yeah, it's true.
light on or light off. She wants the light on, and door open or door closed. Like all of the things you would like expect for a kid to be able to fall asleep, she wants to do the opposite. So I'm like, okay, fine. You can have that independence. But our routine is prayer, song, sleep. You don't get to keep changing your mind. So you get to make your choices, and then here's our routine. And we did it last night, and I put her to bed at 7. We did not get her out until this morning. And I'm like, hallelujah. So anyways, It's a process. It's hard. We have to try new things all of the time. And that's probably going to change in a week because she's going to figure it out. But I think that just knowing that it's okay to be an imperfect parent, your kids are still going to love you. Just always try to make that repair, and you'll be just fine.
Hearing your stories makes me feel a lot better about my 2-year-old. So thank you very much for that. All right. So Lauren, what would be your number one takeaway that you wanted moms to do as a result of this?
So I would say that usually I say stay curious about behavior, but I also want to put in there that all feelings are valid. And I think that's a really important concept to understand and start to figure out for ourselves. Like all of our feelings are valid. If we're feeling angry and frustrated, we need to recognize it's okay to feel this way. But then also our kids' feelings are valid. So instead of dismissing feelings as they come up, like a lot of times I feel like it's really easy for us to go, oh no, it's like, you're fine, be tough, get up, stop crying, you're good. Because we're uncomfortable with their emotions. So we're trying to make it go away. Right. But instead to really respond in a way that's like, it's okay to be sad. Do you need a break? Or you're feeling really scared. Sometimes I feel scared when this, and like relate to them, because then they're not shamed in their emotions and they can really feel validated. And that's going to help improve your relationship and improve behavior, because they're not going to amp up their behavior to try to communicate really what they're feeling. Like, no, mom, really, this is scary to me. So I'm going to freak out now.
Right.
Anyways, so I have a print that I sent with this thing. It's like a free mad chart or whatever. And if a child is having like really hard, strong emotions, then sometimes they have really strong, hard behaviors. And I'm not saying that because all feelings are valid, all behaviors related to that feeling are valid, but because all feelings are valid, there are some ways that you can express those feelings in appropriate ways. And so in this chart, it just has some ideas for what they can do when they're feeling frustrated or angry or mad. And so maybe that would be a place to start if you're having that. But just remember that all feelings are valid.
I love that. Thank you so much. Lauren Pace, author, health coach, and mom. We appreciate you taking the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.